Welcome back. This will be the last video that we're thinking about this bar chart specifically, and we're going to take the opportunity to think through axes. This is the first plot that we have where we have axes and we have tick marks on these axes. So let's think about how to control those tick marks. We're going to start by thinking about the x-axis as shown here, because this is the quantitative axis, and so it's the place we would be most used to seeing ticks being shown. So we're going to think about updating the x-axis, and we want to control something about these tick marks. So first, let's just think about what we might do to remove them all. Okay, so the two features that we have right now is that there's ticks on the outside of the axes and there's labels for those tick marks. And so if we want to get rid of the ticks themselves, we can just say ticks equals an empty string. When I run this, you'll see that the lines that used to be associated with the numbers are no longer there. Those are the ticks. They're gone. The other thing is we have the tick labels. So we can say show tick labels equals false. And if I do that, then all of the values are gone. Now, I could still have ticks and not show the tick labels. So I could do something like comment out the empty string for ticks, and that'll put back ticks, but they won't have the labels. But we do have other options for ticks. We have the default, which is what Plotly is always doing, even when we don't specify anything, and that's the outside tick mark. So nothing has changed. But we also could have inside, and now we can see that the ticks are on the inside of the chart, pointing towards the data. And if we add back in the values, then we have values on the outside, tick marks on the inside. And this is a default in many programs. I personally don't really like it because it makes the tick marks sort of butt into the data, and it can overlap and make it harder to see, and it also just feels like a little crowded to me here. So I typically prefer having just outside tick marks. Other things that we could control about it are the length of these tick marks. So for instance, we could say that I would like the tick length to be something sort of crazy, like 20. That would make them 20 pixels long. They'll be huge on here. There might be times that you want this. There might be times you don't want that. You can make them very small, almost hard to see. So this one tick mark is going to be the length that's the same width as a line. So it adds just one additional amount of width to the equal to the amount that the line is already as the tick mark. I think a lot of times something like 5 might look pretty good, 6 might look pretty good. It kind of just depends on what feel you want. Do you want the tick marks to jump out and dominate or not? And so we'll keep the tick length at 5. Something else that we can do is we can control how wide this is. So right now the default is that the tick marks are just as wide as the axis. Those are both 1 pixel wide, but we could say tick width is also 5. Why not? And then we'll end up with very wide tick marks down here. If you want the tick marks to stand out a little bit, and maybe you just make them twice as wide as the line, and they'll sort of be bold looking tick marks. Again, for me, it's not something I particularly think looks good. I like to have my tick marks the same thickness as the axis line, and so we'll just keep them at 1 here, but now you do know how to control them. And then something else we can do is we can control the tick color. And for instance, we could give it a color like red. And now the tick marks are red. Maybe it's a little hard to see here. So if we go back and make these very wide, we'll see that we have these red tick marks shown up here. Okay. So at this point, we know how to control these tick marks, the ones that have the labels on them. In the way that we normally talk about data visualizations, we would call these major tick marks. Major tick marks are the tick marks that carry these labels. But we also have minor tick marks quite often. And those would be tick marks that would appear on the chart, but don't have numbers associated with them. In Plotly, the way we handle this is that we just create a new keyword here, or use a new keyword called minor. This tells it we're thinking about the minor tick marks. We make this a dictionary, and then we can repeat any of the things that we have for our normal tick marks. So for instance, I could say, yeah, I want the ticks to be inside. There's nothing that prevents me from having inside minor tick marks and outside major tick marks. Also, I could make them a tick length equal to 5 and a tick width equal to 3, and I could make them a tick color equal to, let's say, blue. And if I run this, what you'll see is now I have a series of minor tick marks, things that do not bear a label on this axis. Right now, the default is putting 5 tick marks for every, or 5 minor tick marks for every 1 major tick mark. We can control that actually if we want using dtick. That's the spacing between ticks. So what if it was 0.5 instead? So down here, they appeared every 1. So it was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now I'm telling it draw them every half a unit. And so I should see that there's double as many. This isn't really something that I would advocate, but I'm just showing you that you can control this. So let's make something that looks a little bit more reasonable to me. So we have tick width is 2 down here. Let's see. And so let's change the minor tick marks to be outside. Let's change their length to be 3. Let's change their width to be 1. And we'll make them the default black. So I'll just comment out the color. I think having them appear every 1 was reasonable. If we want to have them, we'll change that again here in just a moment. And then let's go back to the major tick marks that are on the outside. The length is 5. We'll have the width be 1 again. We'll change the color back to black. So we'll just comment that out and we will show the tick labels. So this is a pretty standard approach to having major and minor tick marks. The major ones are a little bit longer. The minor ones are a little bit shorter. They're every 1. If we wanted to make this look a little less cluttered, maybe what we could do is reduce the number of major tick marks. Maybe we just have them every 10. And then we put minor tick marks where the major ones used to be every 5. Let's think about how we might do that. I want to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major tick marks. So something else that I can specify within the major tick marks is how many there are. Major ticks equals 5. And then we said we would like the dtick here to be 5 for the minor. And when I come down and look, that's what we have. Now I have 5 major tick marks. It's going to space them 10 apart in order to accomplish that on the axis range we have. And then we're telling it draw these minor tick marks every 5. And to me, this actually looks pretty nice. It's a pretty uncluttered sort of axis. And so the last thing I want to do is just move to the categorical axis and think through what we might do here as well. The tick marks exist so that we can have a number placed precisely on the line where it is, so that there's no ambiguity that the number 10 refers to that point. Look at this bar, or this bar. This bar is the Great Britain bar. It has a label here called Great Britain, and then has a tick mark that tells me it's precisely here that Great Britain is. And that's not really true. Great Britain is this entire bar. And so it's a little misleading to say that it's right here with this tick mark. And moreover, I don't really need the tick mark to tell me that Great Britain is labeling this bar. It's kind of obvious. And so to me, tick marks on categorical axes like this feel a little bit like just chart junk or clutter. And so for me, I would oftentimes just use ticks is this empty string, which gets rid of them. And to me, this looks, again, more clean. I didn't really need those tick marks to assign these bars, and so we might as well just get rid of them and end up with what we're showing here. Because I've changed the tick marks, I've changed the alignment slightly here. Okay, we've changed the margin that's over here on the left and right. We'll talk about how to change margins as well later, but for now, we'll just bring this back a little bit in order to counteract that so that we still have reasonable alignment between the title and the y-axis. Now I have a pretty well formatted set of tick marks. And so the last thing I want to say is we talked about documentation before, and we haven't actually covered all the different aspects of tick marks you might want to change. And so if you wanted to go in and really explore this a little bit more, you have two options. One is you can, well, actually three. One is you can go to the documentation tab, and you can double click on axes and you can see what comes up here. You can also Google what are the ways that I can change Plotly axes and tick marks, and go read the Plotly documentation, or you can have a conversation with this AI bot, as we saw in the very first video on how to use Marimo. So with that, we've explored a little bit how you would change tick marks to control the appearance of the plot, and that's all we have for this video.